Do you know this song? Behind the Glory. Millions sang it. But here's what you don't know about the voice behind it. August, 2025. The song was called Golden, and it sat at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 8 consecutive weeks. The voice behind it belonged to a woman named Iggy, and somehow, her voice had managed to move the entire world. The animated film it came from had become Netflix's most watched movie of all time. But here's what you don't know about that voice. Just 1 year earlier, she had said something in an interview. She said, "I don't want to be an artist. I'm happy as a songwriter." It was ironic, really. Because no one had wanted to be a singer more than her. She had spent 12 years dreaming of standing on a stage. And yet, there she was, saying she didn't want it anymore. 10 years before that moment, she had been sitting in the back of a taxi, heading home. And she was crying. Alone. It was the day SM Entertainment had ended her contract. 12 years as a trainee. 12 years of training, of waiting, of hoping. And she never once stood on that stage. She had learned to lie to herself. "I'm fine," she would say. "I'm happy just writing songs for other people." So how did a dream she claimed to have given up become the number 1 song in the world? How did a voice that was rejected for over a decade end up reaching 300 million people? The answer to that question begins when she was just 11 years old. Let's go back further first. 1995, in New Jersey. She was only 4 years old, sitting in the back of her mother's car with her uncle. A song was playing on the radio, Candy by H.O.T., a Korean pop group. The thing was, she didn't speak Korean. Her family had moved to America when she was very young. But somehow, she sang along to every single word. Perfectly. Her pitch was accurate, her pronunciation clear, even though she had no idea what the words meant. Her uncle turned around from the front seat and stared at her. Then he said something that would change everything: "You should become a singer." That moment became everything to her. That became her dream. Fast forward to 2003. She was 11 years old, and she made a decision. She was going back to Korea. Back to chase that dream her uncle had planted in her mind 8 years earlier. She auditioned for SM Entertainment, one of the biggest entertainment companies in the country, the company behind some of K-pop's biggest names. And she got in. When they told her she was accepted, her heart felt like it was going to explode right there in the audition room. Finally, she thought. Finally, it's happening. She trained alongside girls who would go on to become members of Girls' Generation, one of the most successful K-pop groups of all time. Every day, it was the same routine: mirrors, music, sweat, endless hours of practice. And every day, she would look at herself in those mirrors and think, "Soon, I'll be on that stage. Soon, everyone will know my name." But then, about 3 months in, one of the instructors pulled her aside. And he said something that would echo in her mind for years. He said, "Yoonji, your voice. It's too low." She didn't understand at first. Too low? What did that mean? He explained. "We need clear, high voices. Bright voices. Prettier. Cleaner." So she went home that night and stood in front of her mirror, and she tried to change her voice. She tried to make it higher, brighter, prettier. She pushed and strained, trying to sound like what they wanted. And then her voice cracked. And then, one day, no sound came out at all. She had damaged her vocal cords trying to become someone she wasn't. That night, she locked herself in the practice room bathroom. And she cried. But she had to be quiet about it, because trainees aren't supposed to cry. Trainees are supposed to smile, to be grateful, to work harder. So she cried silently, where no one could see. The years started to blur together after that. Every morning, the alarm would go off at 5 a.m., and her body would feel glued to the mattress. That's because practice didn't end until 2 in the morning most nights. She would drag herself to the mirror and see the dark circles under her eyes, the swollen ankles from dancing for hours on end. The girl training next to her had only been there for 1 year. Yoonji had been there for 3. Then 4. Then 5. And the instructors would still ask her the same question: why aren't you improving? In 2009, she watched as FX debuted. Victoria, one of the members, was 22 years old. Yoonji was 18 at the time, still training, still waiting. In 2011, she turned 20. Still a trainee. In 2014, Red Velvet debuted. Their leader, Irene, was 23 years old. That same year, Yoonji turned 23. And she was still a trainee. She would lie awake at night wondering, why only me? Why is everyone else moving forward except for me? There had been opportunities. Whispers of groups being formed, possibilities of debut lineups. She had trained alongside girls who would eventually debut. But somehow, nothing ever led to her standing on a stage. 12 years passed like this. From 11 years old to 23. And the feedback never changed. Her voice was still too low. Her dancing was still not quite there. Her face was still not quite idol material. In that world, you had to be perfect. You had to hide every flaw, every insecurity, every moment of weakness. You had to look strong even when you were breaking inside. And she was so tired. But here's the thing that no one knew. All those years, while she was smiling and working hard and pretending everything was fine, she hated herself. She was ashamed of her voice. She would think, over and over, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. She became an expert at pretending to be perfect. 2015. She was 23 years old. Someone from the company called her into an office and said 5 words: we're ending your contract, Yoonji. 12 years. 12 years of her life. Gone. She got into a taxi to go home, and as soon as the door closed, she started crying. The driver didn't say anything. He probably thought it was just another heartbroken trainee. He was right. When she got home, she looked at her bank account. Almost empty. She was 23 years old with a high school education and 12 years of dance training, but nothing to show for it. No debut. No stage. Nothing. She couldn't bring herself to call her mother. Because 3 years earlier, she had told her mom the same thing: this time is different, Mom. This time I'm really going to debut. How could she call now and admit she had failed again? For an entire month, she couldn't get out of bed. She just cried and slept and cried some more. She resented K-pop. She resented the idol industry. But most of all, she hated herself for not being good enough. At some point during that month, lying in bed, she asked herself a question: should I give up music completely? But then she realized something. Music wasn't the problem. She still loved music. The problem wasn't the art, it was everything else. The stage, the image, the pressure to be perfect, the need to fit into someone else's idea of what she should be. So she made a decision. She would keep making music. Just differently. She moved to New York and enrolled at NYU, studying music industry and psychology. And around that time, she discovered something called SoundCloud, an underground music scene full of artists like Daku, Sango, and Slow Mo. Their music was different. Raw. Honest. Instrumental focused. She started making beats. Alone in her room, 12 hours a day sometimes. And slowly, it started to feel like healing. She also started singing on original soundtracks for Korean dramas. And one day, some producers heard her beats and said, "Wait, you made this? Can you write melodies over tracks?" She didn't even know what toplining meant, but she said yes anyway. And just like that, without realizing it, she had become a songwriter. 2017. She got an invitation that surprised her: her first SM Entertainment songwriting camp. Not as a trainee this time. As a songwriter. The same company that had let her go was now inviting her back, but in a completely different role. It was the first day of the camp. That morning, she had gotten into an argument with her fiancé over the phone. They were in a long-distance relationship, and it was hard. She was angry and hurt when she walked into the studio. She met two other writers there, Andrew Scott and Cassiopeia. They started talking about relationships and breakups, and someone said something like, "Heartbreak makes you feel like you're going psycho." And someone else said, "We should write a song about that." 30 minutes later, she had a melody. 1 hour after that, she had lyrics. It was only the 5th song she had ever written in her life. She recorded a rough demo with her voice, that low, husky voice that SM had once told her wasn't good enough. She sent it off, not thinking much of it. It was just another demo. 2 years later, in 2019, Red Velvet released a song called Psycho. Her song. And it became a massive hit. #1 in Korea. Gold certification in the United States. That voice they had rejected? The world loved it. But here's the thing, she was still invisible. People knew the song, but they didn't know her face. She was just songwriter in the credits. And she told everyone, including herself, that she was fine with that. "I'm happy just writing songs," she would say. "I don't need to be in the spotlight." She had convinced herself it was true. 2020. She got a phone call about a Netflix animated film. It was going to be the first major animated movie set in Korea, featuring a fictional K-pop girl group who were secretly demon hunters. They wanted her to write songs for it. She couldn't say no. The idea of Korea being represented in an animated film like this, she had to be part of it. For the next 3 years, she worked on that film. Some songs required 60 different demo versions. Most of them got thrown out. It was exhausting, but she kept going. And then came a song called Golden. The directors explained what they needed: a song about a character who was tortured by perfectionism, who was desperately reaching for something just out of reach. They wanted high notes that felt almost impossible, notes that would showcase the character's desperation and ambition. As they described this character, something clicked in Yoonji's mind. That character was her. The perfectionism, the hiding of flaws, the constant pressure, the rejection, all of it. That was her story. She went home right after a dental appointment one day and recorded the demo. And as she sang, something happened that she hadn't expected. She started crying. All those wounds from her trainee days, all those years of hearing "you're not good enough," all of it came pouring out as she sang. She sent the demo to Ian Isadrath, the film's music producer. His response was immediate: "This is massive, Yoonji. This is a smash." He sent it to Maggie Kang, the film's director. She was in a car on the way to the Vancouver airport when she listened to it. Years later, she would describe that moment. She said she had just heard the first few notes when tears started streaming down her face. She knew right then that the film was going to work. But then came another phone call. A call that Yoonji hadn't expected. "Yoonji, we want you to be the singing voice of Rumi, the main character." Her heart stopped. Me? As a singer? It was the one thing she had wanted to hear for 12 years. But now it terrified her. Because she had spent the last 10 years protecting herself by saying she didn't want it anymore. "I'm happy as a songwriter," she would say. "I don't want to be an artist." But that had always been a lie. Of course she wanted it. She had just learned to lie to herself so it wouldn't hurt anymore. "We need you. We need your voice," they said. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, "Okay." It was the most terrifying yes of her life. June, 2025. The film was released. And then came August. Golden hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages flooded in from everywhere. The world was talking about this song, about this voice. She cried all day. She couldn't stop. Because she kept thinking about herself at 11 years old, stepping into that SM Entertainment building for the first time, full of hope and dreams. I did it, she thought. I finally did it. That dream she had claimed to give up? That dream she had told everyone she didn't want anymore? It had come true anyway. 8 weeks. The song stayed at #1 for 8 consecutive weeks. The film became Netflix's most-watched movie of all time. The song went platinum. It was the first song by a female-led K-pop group to hit #1 on the Hot 100. It became one of the longest-running #1 songs by a female group in the 21st century. She performed it on The Tonight Show, singing with that too low voice that the world had fallen in love with. She walked red carpets at the MTV Video Music Awards. She became a Grammy nominee. At 23, they had told her, "You can't be a singer." At 33, she was one of the biggest voices in the world. She had said, "I don't want to be an artist." And then she became one anyway. Because here's the truth: when you say you've given up on a dream, sometimes you're just protecting your heart. You're trying not to break again. But the dream? The dream doesn't care what you say. It doesn't disappear just because you lie about it. But the #1 spot wasn't what mattered most to her. Messages started coming in from fans. One person wrote, "I lost someone I loved, and nothing felt good anymore. But then I heard Golden, and somehow, that song saved me." Another message said, "My grandmother asked the nurse to sing Golden to her in her final moments. That was the last song she wanted to hear before she passed." When Yoonji read these messages, she broke down crying again. Not because of the chart position or the awards or the fame, but because of this. In an interview, she said the #1 spot was never the goal. A Grammy nomination isn't the goal either. If this song can give someone hope, if it can make someone feel like they can keep going, then that's the greatest honor I could ever receive. 2025. She still writes songs. She still sings. And now, she doesn't lie anymore. "Yes," she says. "I wanted to be a singer. For 12 years, I wanted it more than anything. And I still do." So here's the question for you. What's the dream you tell people you've given up on? What's the thing you say you're fine without? Even though you're lying? That dream where you say, "Oh, I'm over it. I'm happy doing something else instead." That dream right there. It's not dead. You know how I know? Because if it were really dead, you wouldn't need to lie about it. You wouldn't need to convince yourself you're fine without it. Yoonji waited 12 years as a trainee. Then she spent another 10 years telling herself she didn't want to be a singer anymore. 22 years total. And then, at 33 years old, her real dream came true. So what's your real dream? The one you're still lying about? It's not too late. This is Behind the Glory.